Setting up a server in the cloud is probably one of the most tedious tasks we need to do. Even if you are a corporate developer who never has to do this, I think there is a lot of value in understanding what goes into this. This module is aimed at a quick and dirty deployment. The goal of this tutorial isn't to teach you scaling or complex ideas, just to follow through all the way. Before we begin, we need to make some changes to the POM file. This is one of the coolest features in Spring Boot, and that says a lot. You can generate an executable binary script that's installed in front of the jar. That means you can literally type the name of the jar file on Linux and it will run. No Java -jar or anything like that. This might seem trivial, but the truly amazing thing is that you can use it as a service on Linux, which means you can bind it to common system services in etc initd. If you are not deeply familiar with Linux, that might not seem like much, but it makes setting up the server much easier. I'm a big believer in sustainability. If running your startup's backend is $5 per month, that gives you a pretty decent chance of running without breaking the bank. A lot of startups, including ourselves, make the mistake of overscaling. We used App Engine, which was very alluring at the time. The problem is that costs quickly ballooned to thousands of dollars per month, which was totally unjustified. Using a VPS is safe and scales with the need of your business. But let's go on and talk about the server itself. I used MariaDB instead of MySQL in production. On the desktop, I preferred MySQL since it had a beta installer for macOS 10. MariaDB is a fork of MySQL that is pretty much compatible. I normally prefer to have a similar environment on production and development, but in this case I use a Mac instead of Linux anyway, so I just went with it. I use SSH to log into the server. If you use Linux or Mac, this is just a command line. For Windows users, there are a lot of free SSH clients in the wild, and you can use them. We'll start on the Linode site. I'm skipping some of the points related to sign-up, billing, etc. I just select the VPS type, which in this case is the cheapest option. I create a new server instance. Once the server is active, we need to install an operating system. I choose to deploy a new image, which in this case refers to the disk image. Effectively, this means operating system install. I choose CentOS because I'm used to it and it's well supported. I type in the root password, which is something you need to remember, so don't lose that. Then deploy. Once I do that, the server will take some time to set up. After it's done, press boot to start up the new VPS. Once the server is booted, you can SSH to it with your root password. Notice that you should normally use a user rather than root, as usage of the root user should be restricted to a minimum. Root is all powerful. You want to reduce usage of root for a few reasons. The obvious one is that mistakes in root can be costly. But another reason can be that if your system was compromised with lower privileges, a hacker has a good chance of elevating these privileges every time you use root. A few years back, Apache was hacked, and the hacker relied on a vulnerability in a script on the site to gain access. The thing is, the script was running under a regular user that isn't root, so he couldn't really do much. He uploaded an exploit that would give him access to root, only if a root user executed a specific command. And bingo, he got root. Had someone not used root, the hacker would have been stuck in purgatory for a long time. So the thing we need to do when we get to the server is create a new user called builder. We'll use that user to run everything. You will notice the sharp character, that is the command prompt of a root user on Unix. When root invokes the passwd command, it doesn't ask for the existing password, as root can override that. Just type in the new password and verify it. In Linux, we install packages and dependencies are resolved automatically. The underlying system in CentOS is RPM, which stands for Red Hat Package Manager. CentOS is a fork of Red Hat. Yum takes that to the next level by connecting to servers and searching for the RPM packages and all the dependencies, and then fetching everything you need to install. wget is a tool that can perform HTTP requests to download a file from command line. Since we don't have a display, opening a browser isn't really practical, and this is reasonably convenient. This is a bit of a dirty trick. If you try to download the JDK, you will notice there is no way to get the download link. Oracle hides it until you check a box, which means you need to set a cookie to get it. That's really annoying, and the only way I found to download the JDK directly to the box was this hack. The alternative, which I've used in the past, is to download the JDK onto my Mac and then use the scp command to copy it to the server. That's really slow, as I need to download and then upload the file. scp is secure copy, and it allows copying files over SSH. I'll discuss it a bit later. You remember I said yum fetches things automatically. So you would expect to do something like yum JDK and have the JDK installed. Technically, that would work, and might even work here. All Linux distributions ship with OpenJDK, which is the open source version of Java. It's pretty similar, but not identical to the Oracle JDK that we had to download. One of the main reasons I did this was support for JavaFX, which doesn't exist in the JDK. We need it for the CSS compiler, and I wanted it to work. So I'm still using yum instead of RPM directly to install the package. Using yum is important as it can update its install database and resolve dependencies.